We are kickstarting the show with brand new polling data for you that we can reveal exclusively here on Patrick Christys tonight. The results are fascinating, but it's what's revealed when you drill down into the numbers that really tells you a heck of a lot about where we are as a nation. So here we go. To quote Chris Whitty, first slide please. More than half of the country feel worse off than they did a year ago, 54% to be precise. And when asked if it's time for a change in Westminster, 66% of you tend to agree or strongly agree. Interesting there, though, that just 81% of Labour voters think it's time for a change. What's happened to the rest of them? Only 74% of Lib Dems as well. Let's get into what the top priorities are for voters at the next election. So, first, it's the cost of living crisis, the money in your pocket. Second, it's improving the National Health Service. Record backlogs there, strikes, that needs sorting, doesn't it? Then we've got stopping the boats. That came in at 17%, but among Tory 2019 voters, that's at 35%, which is their highest priority. So Tories who voted in the last round think stopping the boats is their top priority. That's being echoed in my inbox so far, gbviews@gbnews.com. But then we come to overall voting intention. So this is the big one, really, isn't it? Labour would win 45% of the vote. The Tories would win 23% and Reform would win 10%. That would put Reform level nationally with the Liberal Democrats. I think that's quite a remarkable achievement, really, isn't it? That would almost definitely hand the keys to Downing Street to Labour. But check this out. So drilling down into the numbers, we see that 38% of Tories who voted Conservative last time would vote for the party again if there was an election tomorrow. So just 38% of them. And 31% of people who voted Lib Dem last time say that they would now vote Labour. So when they're asked which former Prime Minister as well that you would most like to bring back today, can we guess who the winner is? Margaret Thatcher was first, Winston Churchill came in second, and Tony Blair is third. Interestingly, 17% of Labour voters wanted Gordon Brown compared to 19% of Labour voters wanting Blair. I wonder what's happened there. So there we have it, the latest round of exclusive polling data for us here at GB News. It's time to unpack this now with my panel. Let's get their thoughts, shall we? Former BBC chief political correspondent John Sargent, we've got political commentator Suzanne Evans and the journalist Michael Walker. Suzanne, I'll start with you. Cost of living crisis, the main issue for you or not?
I think it's the main issue for the country. It's really got to be. So I'm not surprised this has come in at number one. I think for me, the most shocking thing about the polling data that we've just seen is only 38% of Conservatives who voted in the last general election would vote Conservative again. That is an absolutely shocking result for Rishi Sunak. Boris was immensely popular, swung into power with that 90-seat majority, and now only 38% would vote Conservative again. A shocking indictment of Rishi Sunak's leadership, I'm afraid.
John, in the inbox at the moment, I've asked people what their major issue is going into the next election. The most important thing is to send a message to the Conservatives and Labour that they have had enough by voting Reform. That says Sarah. Well, 10% of the nation, Sarah, are with you on that. The overwhelming response is definitely immigration. John says immigration, both legal and illegal. Your thoughts on the immigration issue being in third, John?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem about this is that it makes no sort of direct comparison with the main parties. So you get a general feeling that what are you going to ask yourself on election day? And the answer comes back because it's sort of like a straightforward question. Well, how am I affected in terms of the cost of living, in terms of the economy and how much I'm earning and how I'm doing? And that, of course, is the correct answer. But life isn't as simple as that. And it depends on what your constituency is, when the arguments take place, and whether or not you can clearly see a dividing line between the government at the moment and the opposition. And frankly, at the moment, it's rather muddled. You do not get a clear picture of what Labour would do. And so this poll, although it seems to be, so that's it then, we've decided what's going to happen in the next election, I don't think it's as simple as that. At the moment, the Conservatives are in deep trouble. They've not really decided when they want to go to the country. I think there's a strong argument for an early election.
That seems to be the noise. It seems to be the noise at the moment, doesn't it? We're going to get a May election.
So for all those reasons, although, yes, you get the dissatisfaction vote, it's absolutely clear, but don't expect too much in terms of, so that's it, we've got it now, we've got the election result. I don't think it's as simple as that.
Michael, you must be jumping for joy that Reform exists. We've got 15% of the latest round of Tory voters saying they're going to vote for reform, and they are handing the keys to Downing Street to Labour, aren't they?
Well, it wouldn't make much difference anyway. I mean, if Labour are on 43%, then splitting the right-wing vote isn't going to be the decisive factor, is it? Obviously, didn't include the Lib Dems and the Greens. I'm not saying that's...
No, it's just because it was the same as 10%, yeah.
But in any case, I mean, I think what this polling shows is how difficult the situation Rishi Sunak is, because he's got to decide, what am I going to fight the next election on? And obviously, I think rightly, what people care most about is the cost of living crisis and the NHS. Now, in my view, the reason we've got a crisis in both of those areas is because of 13 years of Tory mismanagement. We had a squeeze in the NHS funding. It's gone back up now, but it doesn't really work if staff have left. You can't just throw a bunch of money at it and hope it's all going to fix itself within a year, right? So you've got this really long-term problem of their making. The same with the cost of living crisis. So people might feel worse off this year than they did a year ago. We're actually worse off than we were 15 years ago, right? So there has been zero wage growth in this country for the past 15 years. So neither of those things he can fight on. So then he's decided, OK, well, let's just go for immigration. We'll go for immigration. The problem there is he said this is the number one issue for the country. Then he can't solve it.
Well, he's also
and that means the Tory vote is now split between them and reform.
The other thing with the immigration problem for Rishi Sunak is that he keeps saying, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to come down really hard on it. And then about 2 days later, you get the old reverse ferret and people lose trust. I do think that the fundamental lack of trust here across the board is quite chasmous, really. Would you back that, though, Suzanne, that it's all the Tories to blame when it comes to the NHS and the cost of living crisis? I mean, we've had a war in Ukraine, we've had a pandemic.
Yeah.
Also, when it comes to the NHS, I don't think the people whose job it is to run the NHS actually get enough stick.
Yeah, I totally agree, actually. I think we've got the NHS as a massive problem, and even more so now. 7.5 million people on the waiting list. And I do disagree with Michael. It's not about 13 years of Conservative government. It's about, exactly as you said, it's primarily lockdowns, which also caused, of course, massive inflation, furlough, money printing, end of supply chains. Of course, inflation was going to rocket. There's no doubt about that. Same with the NHS. If you shut down the NHS and make it a COVID-only service, of course, there's going to be a massive backlog. And let's not forget that the Labour Party were pushing for harder, longer lockdowns all the time. So you can't blame the Conservatives for that. And now, one of the other statistics I'd just like to pull out is 66% of people saying they want change in Westminster.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's not going to happen, though, is it? Unless people start to vote for smaller parties in a much, much larger numbers. And 10% form sounds very good, but it's probably not going to translate into a single MP in Parliament. That's the problem. So change in Westminster, in principle, people are clearly fed up with the whole shebang and the whole lot of them, but it's probably not going to change.
John, I'm just going to bring you in to talk about another thing that poll revealed, which is about former Prime Ministers that they would like to see back. And Margaret Thatcher was the out-and-out winner there when it came to which former Prime Minister you would like to, in her case, quite literally resurrect. So what do you make of that?
Well, I think it's interesting. If you think of the list, you think Churchill, bring Churchill back. And what might he do? Declare war on Russia or something? So it's all to do with, the general picture of there are these historical figures. In practice, if they came through the door, people would be stunned and think, oh, no, not that one.
If they came through the door now, I think they'd be stunned. I mean, could you imagine what Thatcher or Churchill would be?
Horrified. But the idea that you would then settle them down, and this sort of idea that what you need is a great Prime Minister. No, what you need is someone at this precise moment to consider the problems and convincingly explain the way out. That's what you really need, and you need that now. And to say, oh, well, there's Churchill, what would he do? And what would Margaret Thatcher do? At the end of Margaret Thatcher's term, she was amazingly unpopular. There were moments of terrific achievement. There were certainly terrific achievements for Blair. He won 3 elections. So you look back on these characters, you've got to consider what it was like for them and for all of us at the time that they were in power. That's what I'm saying. Now, I don't mean to... So if you look at this, you say, well, who do you really think could walk through the door and at least start to talk about the problems of today? The answer would be Tony Blair.
Blair came... So
Blair.
You'd have Blair back?
Yeah.
Good grief.
No, in the question of... You've got these 3 possibilities. Who do you think could walk through the door and help?
He's got the advantage of being alive, I suppose.
He's got the advantage of being alive.
He could at least walk through the door, yeah.
No, but he's also considering a lot of these issues. That's all. It just happens to be the case.
He's getting very well paid to do so, isn't he? Although I suppose actually he doesn't take the money.
What do you make of that, though, when you look at it in terms of who people were most likely to bring back?
I think it's a shame that Attlee's not on there. I mean, as someone who disagrees with Margaret Thatcher, I can see why she's on there, because she was a consequential Prime Minister. She had a critique of what was going on in society and a sort of her version of how to solve
Clement Attlee scored at 2%.
2%. So
2%.
Very, very
Can I
depressing.
just say the biggest one was Don't Know with 39%.
Yeah.
So there is
I'm that category.
Yes, yeah, but...
that's about you, is it?
That's me. I'm the 39%. That's all right with you, too.
It's not exactly a ringing endorsement for any of them, is it,
No,
really?
no,
But
of course it
the
is,
one
and-
thing that all three have got in common is they are strong leaders of conviction. And I think that's what people think politicians are lacking now. They blow like a reed in the wind, depending on what's popular, what's not, what the latest poll says. They change their minds like the weather. I think this to me says we want a leader who says what they think and does what they say.
You know,
Also, charisma we want. That's the other thing
Yeah, but
with
it
those
gets
three.
battered out of
Somebody who
charisma,
fascinates them, somebody who then says, leader of the opposition's on the box now, he's doing an interview. Can you imagine people saying, we must watch Keir Starmer, I'm sorry, I've got to cut off what we're doing now. People won't. Or even the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister's on now. You look at the figures.
Yeah.
At some of these key moments.
The only time I've ever seen him get really energised when he was sitting on Elon Musk's knee talking about artificial intelligence. I thought, good grief, we used to just have strong words with nerds like that at school, didn't we? Now they run the country. So there we go. Look, I think the overwhelming take for me is this, right, which is that 66% of people think that they want real radical change in Westminster. But then when you look at a load of Tory voters that are thinking of voting Reform, a load of Lib Dems are looking at thinking of voting Labour, and 81% of Labour voters are actually desperate for change. So what the heck is happening to the other 19%? I think there's a heck of a lot of politically homeless people out there. It's echoed in the inbox, gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep those emails coming in. I will go to those shortly. Patrick, I am living in a different world. Town centres are very busy, expensive coffee shops and restaurants. No for cost of living crisis for Faye, she says. Loads of people saying that really their main issue is immigration. So certainly for the GB News viewers, shock horror, immigration is the big issue. I am inclined to agree with you, both legal and illegal. I think a lot of the other problems in this country would be sorted out if we had that under control, but the Tories didn't do it.